Hello and welcome. Tonight I have one of my favorite guests on. Tony Boza is back, and most of you know who have lived in Minnesota for any length of time that Tony Boza was our Minneapolis Chief of Police from 1980 to about 1988. Actually, New Year's Eve 1988 was your last day here as police chief. He has been very busy since then, writing. He's written 9 or 10 books, Tony?
Something like that.
Something like that. He is going to be talking tonight about a fascinating book that I took on a trip with me and have been reading and really finding interesting and important. The name of the book is called Expert Witness, Breaking the Policeman's Blue Code of Silence. And we'll talk more about what that title means and suggests in just a minute. I want to say just a few more things about Tony's career. He has had a fascinating career, and we're also going to talk about his early days. But in the United States, he started out as a policeman in New York and rose to the rank of commander in the Bronx, and then was the second in command with the Transit Police in New York City before coming here to Minneapolis in 1979 or 80. But welcome, Tony, and let me put you right on the spot and have you just tell the viewers a little bit about how you got to America, because it's such a story of an immigrant having great success, but fill us in on those early days with your folks.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, Mary. I love what you do, and you work very hard and effectively, and you're very kind to do this. Thank you.
Very welcome.
I was born on October 4th, 1928, and that translates to 10-4. 10-4 is a signal of acknowledgement all over the police world.
Right.
It's always 10-4. So my parents obviously knew something I didn't about my...
Something in the wind there.
My father was a simple man, very humble, never took a drink in his life, didn't smoke or anything. He was a stoker. And you had to flee. The part of Spain we came from was very poor, no jobs.
The northwest corner,
Northwest
right?
corner of Spain, Galicia it's called. So I try to figure out who started this march of my family. And I went to Ellis Island with Erica, and we checked for both his mother's name and Boza. So it's Alvarinho Boza. So sure enough, there is, but it wasn't my father. It was his brother, Fernando Alvarinho Boza. And he came to America in 1903 from Liverpool, England. So what he did is he took a boat to England and then sneaked to America. And then he brought his brothers with him. Jose Antonio was my father. He was a stoker, simple man, didn't spend much time with him in the course of my life. We arrived in America in December 1937. I was 9 years old. I was stunned to discover that the streets were not paved with gold. That was shocking.
So you had, even as a 9-year-old boy in Spain, an image of what New York City and America would look like.
Well, when I was in Spain for the first 9 years, I was a very mischievous little boy. Really did. I drove my mother utterly crazy. But when we came to America, the thing that strikes me in retrospect as I look back is the enormous power of the American culture. There's a reason why immigrants, children, are embarrassed by the accents of their parents. They're listening to the music, watching the movies, reading this, comic books, reading this, reading that, television, and they reject the past. And I did too. It took me a long time to reconcile myself to being a Spaniard originally, and to look at the roots and so on. So the overwhelming power of the American culture is one of the great discoveries every immigrant makes and very few talk about. So we went through tenement life. My mother was a seamstress. My father died when I was 44. My sister...
When he was 44.
He was 54.
He was 54.
54. He was
Okay.
born in 1890, same year
He
as
died in 1944.
44.
Misunderstood.
Right. And he was born the same year as Adolf Hitler, except that Adolf Hitler was born April 20th, 1890. Anyway, we lived a tenement life. My mother was a seamstress. My father died. My mother was an ardent feminist at heart, had no interest in getting married, an attractive woman, and very tough and smart, but had no interest. So she preferred to be a seamstress, and we all struggled, and I was a feckless, idiot kid, and graduated, staggered out of high school with a very low average, really dumb. I was one of these neighborhood corner hangouts. And then I had a series of experiences that held up a mirror to me, to my ignorance. And I began to think, my God, how ignorant can you be? I went to see a movie, The Fountainhead, and I loved it. And I went and I encountered a friend of mine who was very bright. And he said, oh, collectivism versus individualism, perfectly obvious. And I thought, what
is he talking about?
What's that? So I thought, oh my God. So I started becoming what you would call an autodidact, self-taught. I went to the libraries, I read all the classics, I joined the Great Books Foundation, read everything. I actually did not go to college until I was 28 years old.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it took me 8.5 years to get a bachelor's degree and 3 years to get a master's degree. Anyway, my sister had dropped out of school. She was a big, statuesque, attractive woman, and she married a guy at the age of 19, and he became a cop. And that's how I got into the police world. I was a feckless, hapless, utterly incompetent kid.
So had you not made that choice, who knows what might have happened?
I would have become a sanitation man. I would have been a garbage collector instead, because when I saw Death of a Salesman, I saw Willie Low Man there on the stage, and that was me. Low Man.
I remember you said that once
So
years
that
ago.
shook me up. So I studied hard. For the first time in my life, I prepared myself for something, the police exam. 25,700 people applied for about 4,000 jobs.
How many?
25,700. This is 1949. And for about 4,000 jobs.
Competition was tough.
And it was a multiple choice exam. I got 12 out of the first 13 questions wrong. They announced it over the radio. It was that big a deal. And I thought, typical, that's me. My esteem was low esteem. So, but in fact, I did all right. And I became a cop. I went to the Army for 2 years. And then in January 1, 1953, became a cop in the New York City Police Department, did a street beat. And then I discovered the miracle of America, competitive examinations. You go into a room anonymously with a bunch of guys in those days, and you take a test. And if you study and prepare for the test, you could be a sergeant. My God. So I did, and lieutenant, and captain. And after that ended the exams. And then after that, I was appointed. But a crazy man took over the New York City Police Department in 1970, Patrick V. Murphy. I adored him.
I remember hearing about him.
And he had promoted me 3 times in 30 months.
Oh.
And he gave me the Bronx and left. So that's, I didn't know very much about police work, to be honest. I was fundamentally a manager, an administrator. I had studied management, administration, and I had studied the New York City Police Department and its labyrinthine, Vatican-like workings with a passion. So I put that passion to work and just kept climbing through the ranks without ever really understanding where I was or why.
Well, you obviously had leadership, style, and qualities. I want to jump forward now to now and then talk about your love of being a policeman, of the work policemen do, police women, but then also your very keen awareness of the troubles within the departments around our country. And is that why you wrote the book, to
Well, I was
help
shocked.
people become more aware?
There's only one reason I wrote that book. I love the policing. I love the cops. 98% of them do a great job. 2% are horrible criminals, psychos, alcoholics, but they set the tone. Mm-hmm. And with the unions, they screw up the departments altogether. So I became an expert witness because I wrote an article about women, and I testified in 1975, and women began to come into the ranks. I was the only male high-ranking official willing to testify women can be cops. So we won a whole series of lawsuits, and Pat Murphy promoted me 3 times. And then I got involved in a controversy, and I wrote a book about it called Bronx Beat, where I was accused of mishandling the Ken Norton, Muhammad Ali fight on September 28, 1976 in the Yankee Stadium. There was a lot of heat. The cops were demonstrating, 1,300 cops rioting around the stadium, all these feral children abusing these fancy rich people coming to the Bronx for the first time in their lives. And most of the blame focused on me, and they ultimately forced me to retire, to leave there. That's why I went to the transit police. I was there for 3 years, and there they fired me. There was no ambiguity there, and I was desperate. And fortunately, Minneapolis was desperate.
And they did not care if you'd been fired twice, right?
They really didn't. If you recall, the mayor was Al Hofstad, and he had given up. He said, I cannot control the police department. I'm not running for re-election. Don Fraser, then a congressman, said, I will undertake a nationwide search and bring in a reformer. And he was elected mayor. He undertook a nationwide search. I applied. He hired me. There were a lot of very tough candidates, about 14 tough candidates. And then it got down to 2, a Midwesterner from Cincinnati and me. And everybody thought he was going to pick the Midwesterner, but he picked me. So
the outsider. When you subtitled the book, or the publishing company did, Breaking the Blue Code of Silence, the Policeman's Blue Code of Silence, tell us what you mean when you say the Blue Code of Silence. Right. I think we all have our ideas, but let's hear it from you.
Well, you know, people look at a cop and they'll say, oh, he is white, or he is black, or he is a she. But they're looking at the wrong thing. They're all blue. It's a brotherhood in blue, and they stick together. And the worst thing you can do is to think out on one of your colleagues, to rat on him. So if you, Rodney King, there are 30 cops there. Not all of them are kicking and pummeling him, but not one testified. Not one.
So it's protect your own.
Self-protect. And you know, this business of perjuring themselves, which happens routinely everywhere in America, is called testifying. Testifying. They have a name for it. So the Blue Code of Silence is a self-protective code where they look out after each other's interests no matter what, against anything in front of them.
Were you aware, Tony, of this code as much as you are now when you were in New York, when you were in the thick of things in the Bronx, when you were in the thick of things here earlier? Were you as bothered and as aware of this as you are today?
No, but I was aware. It was an evolution. Okay. It was not a revelation.
Okay.
It was an evolution. I gradually became aware that the New York City Police Department was brutal and corrupt. And I gradually became aware that because of the work of Pat Murphy, that could be changed. Pat Murphy was brilliant and tough. So that could be changed. And I never dreamt that it could be. So gradually. And then in 1975, these people asked me to testify in Women in Policing, and I went around the country testifying. And that's where the idea began to grow that I could become an expert witness, and perhaps since I spent from 1953 to 1988 about 45 years in policing, 46, and not really undertaking any permanent reforms that I could see, I thought, well, maybe through lawsuits we can begin to reform the police. And I have to tell you that the work represented in expert witness is the most important work I've ever done in my life. And that's why I wrote the book, because I had to memorialize it somehow. These cases, Central Park jogger, the Rodney King case, the tree hugger case in Oakland, the woman who saved the redwoods, just amazing series of stories. And I thought, if we get big judgments against the police, and we did. In Oakland, we got 4.9 million. In Chicago, we got 6.2 million. So big judgments were not, but you know what? It was like a little pebble in the middle of a lake with no one around. A little ripple and nothing. So, your viewers will not be aware of the fact that they are being taxed secretly by these settlements and lawsuits that they have to pay out of their pocket.
So as an expert witness, do you almost always come in looking at the police departments that you're
Always.
involved with in a case? But you have been a neutral witness too.
Well, not very many times.
Not very many times, okay.
I was willing. I even offered to testify on behalf of the police in a couple of cases. They didn't. They would not take me.
Okay.
But almost invariably, the cases involved blacks, some Native Americans who sucked it up and sued the cops. Lawyers, usually left-wing, People's Law Office, the Southern Poverty Law Center, all these centers, American Civil Liberties Union. So all of these people take on these causes, and they hired me. I wouldn't take a case I didn't believe in. So the arrangement always was, send me some material, let me look at it. If I like it, I'll take it. If I don't like it, I won't take it.
So what would be the criteria for taking a case? That you believe in it, you believe in the cause. What else?
I have to conclude that the cops acted in bad faith. I was willing to tolerate honest mistakes. So I have to believe they engaged in brutality, racism, profiling, and false arrests, and unwarranted searches and seizures, maliciously prosecuting. So I needed to see evidence of malice. And once I saw that, and I wound up doing about 90 cases over a 22-year period, 60 of which are in the book.
Yes, the book is full of very diverse cases in which he describes, sort of the case in a nutshell, and then how you worked and were effective. Most of the time, it seems things went well in terms of your testimony.
We won a lot of cases. We did win.
We have just about 8 minutes left. As an example of what you did as an expert witness, let's talk about the New York jogger case, because that is probably one of the biggest cases you were pulled in on.
It's the most fascinating, for sure.
And just, I wish we had more time, Tony, but tell us some of the basics about that case.
Well, it's still
1989.
Still not resolved.
I know it. That's what's unbelievable.
A bunch of kids from Harlem went into Central Park and acted up, pushed some bicyclists around, said some naughty things to women, pushed a couple of people about. But at the same moment, this very experienced stalker was stalking a lone young woman,
Stalker,
jogging,
rapist, murderer,
jogging.
right?
By now, this guy is really expert. He knows just what he's doing. What he does is he stalks, finds a secret location. In this case, he hits her over the head with a limb from a tree, rapes, sodomizes her. Then he asks for keys to her apartment and her address. That's what he did with all the others. He did a bunch of them. And she refuses to give it to him. And that's when he starts really battering her. And he came within a fraction of an inch of killing her. He just battered her.
She went into a coma.
But he never did burglarize her apartment, as he had several others. He went on to kill one or two other women, stalked a bunch of them. The cops never made the connection between these lone young women jogging in Central Park who were being stalked and raped and sodomized and killed and burglarized.
They arrested the 5 young boys.
So
right?
they arrested these 5 kids for something they called wilding, behaving in a wild fashion. And then they set them apart, and the 5 boys didn't even know what was going on, that they were being asked about a rape, sodomy, very likely murder, and they were giving up little bits and pieces that the cops were trying to push together. But one of them very stupidly said, "I got mines." Now, you can't make the dialogue like that up. I got mines. In other words, he had sex with her. And that's the statement. They fought the charges. The jury deliberated endlessly. I did not testify in that case. They hired me for the civil suit that followed, which is still not resolved. I am sure, I'm guessing, but I'm sure that people got promoted and rewarded for framing those 5 innocents. In the meantime, the real rapist has been arrested for murder. They didn't connect him to any other crime. And he meets a guard, and now he's in a structured setting in prison. This is a guy who, at the age of 16, raped his mother. The guard is very kind to him. He gets structure, and his conscience begins to bother him. And through a series of events, he confesses. The district attorney of New York, Robert Morgenthau, who's now about 94, went to Amherst College, and whose father was Franklin Roosevelt's Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Morgenthau.
Oh, right. That's why I know the name.
Took up the case, and against the police opposition, won the acquittal, the release of the 5 boys, and DNA evidence locked Reyes, the actual rapist, into the case beyond all doubt.
But when the thing that intrigued me was the most, I guess, was when they did take the semen on the woman and test it. None of the 5 boys were a match, and yet they still
That's why they fought.
did not release the boys.
The whole case was built on a confession that was created by the police. In Chicago, the one cop named John Burge regularly tortured prisoners into confessing to crimes they didn't commit by attaching generator clips to their testicles and giving them horrifying shocks so hard that some of them gritted their teeth so hard that they loosened all their teeth. So they pieced together all these little bits and pieces into a confession, testified, lied, and framed them. And those 5 are now free, suing, and nobody wants to lose this case on their watch, so they keep asking for delays.
So it's 20-some years. In your role, we just have 2 minutes left, but in a nutshell, what did you do with this case?
I worked with a lawyer who was doing the suing. Now, I'm not even sure he's still involved in the case. There's been a change of lawyers, and I don't know the status of the case as we speak, but a lawyer hired me to look over the case and to be prepared to testify in a civil lawsuit against the police, which I agreed to do, and to this day has not happened.
So here's a case of you're being pulled in, being an advisor more than an actual expert witness. Then,
Well,
right?
the consultant, no, he anticipated that I would be used as an expert witness, that I would have to testify, and so did I. But that day has not arrived.
It's an amazing case and a terrible
Oh, it is.
example of police problems in the most
It's an astonishing
extreme way.
case.
We are out of time, Tony. I'm so sorry. We have too much to talk about, too much that is fascinating here when you come down. But thank you so much.
No, thank you, Mary. You're wonderful.
I want to hold the book up so we can take a look at it and we can maybe roll this in later. But this book is a great read. This is just one of the stories, one of the cases that fills this book with fast page turning kind of experience. But
Bless your heart.
thank you so much. Great to see you. I will be back next week. Until then, have a good week and check out Expert Witness. Thanks for being with us.